moving ahead with yet another earnings candidate, we've got Mr. Vineet Agarwal, the Managing Director of Transport Corporation of India, joining us on the show. Mr. Agarwal, hi, good morning, and thanks for your time. Quickly breaking down these numbers and more importantly, your outlook. At the end of the last quarter, you did say that you remain cautiously optimistic, retaining your 10 to 12% revenue growth guidance for FY27 despite macro uncertainties. If you can quickly tell us if this 10 to 12% guidance remains intact.
Yes, because we are optimistic about the 10 to 12% top line and the bottom line kind of growth. Though there are headwinds right now, but there's also the general factor is that the overall economy is so large that there is some level of growth that is always going to be there. And there are, of course, a lot of trends that are there. For example, consumer trends that are changing, and we do work for some of the for the e-commerce as well as for the quick commerce companies, where we are seeing a huge transition towards different modes of different types of logistics fulfillment capabilities. And those are things that are really going to help us keep our growth momentum, for example. Then, of course, as things are getting more and more formal, a lot of businesses are coming to us. MSME growth is also coming up. So we are quite confident that we'll be able to maintain the growth trajectory. We are also doing a large capex, and that should also help us in the long run.
Okay, so you're confident of sustaining the growth trajectory, and the capex is also likely to aid. But let's also talk about inflationary pressure and geopolitical crisis. Do you believe the worst of this is perhaps behind us, or do you believe these factors will probably continue to weigh heavy on margins in the coming quarters?
Well, with the revival of the Gulf crisis, fuel prices are again started to move up, and that has a direct correlation to our shipping business, where the bunker prices, the fuel prices that you use for shipping, those prices have literally doubled since March. They came down a little bit, but they're still quite high, and they moved up in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So the headwinds on this side continue to remain. The government had increased the fuel prices, diesel prices by 5-7%. So that is continuing. I think we have passed it on to all our customers, and that because of our contracts, back-to-back contracts. But the general feeling is that there is still a little bit more pain that is remaining. Also, the monsoon season, we do not know how it's going to pan out at the end, and whether it's going to have a negative impact. But I think many companies are bracing for that also.
We'll be watching out for that. Mr. Agarwal, let's talk about your freight business. The turnaround in that segment was expected from FY27. Has that happened? Has that played out on ground as per what the street was expecting?
Yes, as you can see, the freight business has recorded a higher growth in the first quarter, substantially higher growth. And I think the pressure on that business is starting to ease a little bit. However, it is still, as I said, this financial year is very critical for us to regain some of the strength back in that business.
Mr. Agarwal, freight and fuel prices have risen substantially over the last few quarters. Have you passed on the impact of higher costs to your consumers, and what is the time lag between the pass-through?
So typically what happens is that, the fuel prices don't get passed on right away. It takes a few months for it to go, a few weeks for it to be passed on, because it could be at the end of the month when you're getting it and the customer says, can you push it to the next month, or rather start of the next month. And then the billing process happens for the supplementary additional billing that we have to do for customers in some cases. So yes, but most of it gets passed on. Only in some kind of spot businesses where it might not reflect the kind of change that happens in the freight rates is when we might not get the full increase. But otherwise, it's a typical pass-through.
Understood. We'll be watching out for how this pass-through also plays out. Mr. Agarwal, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful as always to be chatting with you on the show. Thank you so much. Viewers, with that, I'm afraid we're completely timed out on this edition of Midcap Masala. From Ashish, me and the team that put this show together. Thank you.